Alright guys, we're back with part 4 of Seminal Tragedy. Roger says hey. This is going to be our last video in this series before we tackle the prelude to World War I. So let's get started. Now we're going to start with your comments from the last video. We're going to go into comment time here, and this is just when I bring up just a handful of your comments from the previous video that kind of like helped me to clarify some things, learn some things. So if you don't want to watch this, click the reaction chapter and go straight to that. But for the rest of us, let's check out your comments. First comment comes from El Conocido 94. He says both Russia and Serbia are Slavic countries. Russia, being the bigger Slavic country, tends to protect or influence other smaller Slavic countries like Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, Belarus, and others. Problem is, I don't know what a Slavic country is. So let's what is a Slavic country? Slavic countries are countries that are made up of Indo-European ethno-linguistic groups. The majority of people in Slavic countries speak Indo-European Slavic language. That's countries that are home to Slavs make up about 50% of the entire continent of Europe. Really? I didn't know that. Okay, this is stuff I didn't know about. Some of you guys also who commented on this said that Russia has basically the same religion as Serbia, so that is another tie that they had with each other. So it's like a common language, common religion, common culture type thing. The Slavic stuff, I'm gonna have to like maybe do a video on that, because the Slavic stuff is really foreign to me. Like I haven't really heard much about that. I've heard of the term before, but I never really learned what it was exactly. I still don't quite have a very good handle on it. I kind of understand, also kind of don't at the same time. Job Frenchman says, you don't remember Austria being a major power from the Napoleonic Wars? This is 100 years later and they are still a big power, although a lot weaker than in Napoleon times. By the way, I think it's good for you to look for a few minutes at a map of Europe in 1914. That's going to clear things up a bit maybe. So here's the thing. I do remember Austria being a kind of major player in the Napoleonic Wars. However, Epic History TV did not really go into depth with it. I didn't really get a full idea of just like how big the Austrian Empire was and just how much power they had. He pretty much just mentioned them in terms of battles with Napoleon. So I didn't get a very thorough understanding of Austria at the time. And plus it was also set, as you say, 100 years prior. You know, a lot can happen in 100 years. I don't know if Austria is, like, I don't know where they are 100 years later in Europe and what the state of things is. You know, I just haven't studied this history before. So I don't know this stuff. So that is why I did not make a full connection with the Napoleonic Wars, just because I feel like the information in that was very, very limited regarding Austria. Arjun Snoke says, always look at a historical map of that period. In talking about European history, would surprise you what it was like back then. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was 10 times bigger than Austria is today, or Hungary. Names often say the same for different territories in Europe. Worst example is Poland. So I'm hoping, I've had a lot of you tell me that the prelude videos that the Great War channel does uses maps to kind of explain things. I'm just kind of like holding out for that. So I'm hoping that the Great War channel will kind of teach me that using maps. Stephman says, really feels like you took today's borders and applied it to 1914's Europe in this video. Well, reason being, I don't, like I said, I haven't studied this before. It's not Austria, and it's not a small insignificant country. It's Austria-Hungary, and it was freaking huge. One of the 4 big empires in Europe at the time, very much a big player back then. There were like dozens of comments explaining just like how big the Austrian Empire was and how wrong I was. about calling them an insignificant player in Europe, because I was thinking about them in terms of today, because that's the only Austria I know. Literally, like the Epic History Napoleonic Wars videos are the only reference to the Austrian Empire that I remember ever hearing, to be perfectly honest. It is what it is, so I am glad that I'm doing these videos so that I can get a better understanding of Europe and European history. Okay, so with that out of the way, we're going to get into part 4 of the Seminal tragedy. So part 3 got into how some of the alliances started forming. A lot of like crazy things happened. The ambassador had a heart attack. There was crucial information left out of diplomatic talks. So we're seeing things come together piece by piece, kind of setting up this war. I'm interested to see what part 4 is going to do. I'm assuming we're going to get into the first days of the war. I think they were talking about July 24th. I know July 28th is the official day that World War I started. So we're right there. So I'm curious to see what exactly, who initiated, how this thing got kicked off.
The 24th of July, 1914. It's late at night. A group of haggard-looking men sit in a dim room in the ministry in Belgrade. One of them holds the Austrian ultimatum in his hands. They've spent the day debating how to reply. Defeated, they are about to give in to all demands. A notice slipped under the door. It says that the Russians have started to mobilize. They change their reply, and the final act begins. In their reply, the Serbians agree to 9 out of 10 Austrian demands. They only refuse to allow Austrian officials to have police powers within Serbia. But their reply is a masterstroke, an act of genius in the way it concludes. For at the end, it says that if the Austrians don't find their terms to be fair, the Serbians are more than willing to submit to the resolution of a conference. But if you'll remember, the Austrians hate conferences. They are always getting outvoted at those things. Well, no more. Not this time. They are livid at the Serbian reply, but like always, they turn to their German allies for advice. The Kaiser is still at sea, so Austria's foreign minister Berthold goes to consult Bethmann-Hollweg and Moltke, the head of the German army. They're apoplectic. They say, "What, you haven't declared war already? A month has gone by, get on with it. This isn't what we agreed to. We're losing the sympathies of the people of Europe." You see, after the assassination of the Archduke, public opinion in Europe weighed heavily against Serbia. It was politically impossible for anybody to support them then. But now a month has passed, and this reply, this meeting of most of the Austrian demands, and this offer for mediation made the Serbs seem like the reasonable party. After all, what more could Austria want? So, with the rebukes of the Germans driving him, Berthold returns to Austria-Hungary, and for the first time speaks with Konrad von Hötzendorf, the chief of staff of the Austrian army. He too is apoplectic. What, declare war? Are you kidding me? You needed to tell us weeks ago if that's what you wanted to do. The Austrian army won't be ready for war until the 14th of August, weeks from now. Plus, we don't even know who we're mobilizing against. You want us to prepare for war with Serbia? Yeah, not when Russia's mobilized against us, we aren't. Get us a guarantee of Russian neutrality, and then maybe we can talk about mobilizing against the Serbs. Despondent, pressured toward war by the Germans, told that Austria isn't ready by his own chief of staff, Berthold returns home and begins to think. As the hours grow later, he starts to convince himself. There's a way out of this. He starts to reason that declaring war isn't necessarily the same as being at war, and so maybe if he declares war now, he'll placate the Germans and be able to use that threat to get the Serbs to capitulate before he even needs the Austrian army to be ready to fight. Now, we can all see this for the desperate rationalization that it is. We've all at one time or another gotten ourselves into an impossible situation and let ourselves believe in some wild, harebrained solution that'll surely fix everything. Situation.
Is this a typo? It says D-line now? I think they mean deadline. Not sure about that.
And let ourselves believe in some wild, harebrained solution that'll surely fix everything. Only when we do that, the fate of the world isn't usually hanging in a balance. And so, on the 28th of July, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, with Berthold all the while believing he's going to bring peace by declaring war. But that morning, the morning of the 28th, Kaiser Wilhelm II got back to Potsdam. That very morning, the Kaiser read the Serbian response to the Austrian ultimatum and uttered, "With this, every reason for war drops away." And here is one of the great tragedies of those frantic July days leading to the war. This man, Wilhelm II, for all his inadequacies, for all his failings, for once in his life steps up and tries to become the man he should be, the man who deserves to rule the most powerful nation in the world. And he comes so close. And yet, despite his best attempt, he's too late. The world doesn't reward his effort, things spiral into chaos, war comes, and his empire will fall. The Kaiser tries to open peace talks, perhaps even hold a conference, but the Austrians will have none of it. So he proposes a novel solution: halt in Belgrade. Belgrade, the Serbian capital, is just a few miles from the Austrian border. If the Austrian army occupies the capital, they can declare victory and save face while showing the rest of Europe that they don't plan to annex Serbia. And they can do it quickly enough to perhaps keep the Russians out of the war. But this proposal has to go through Bethmann, and Bethmann's in Berlin. Now get this, it's 1914, so as impossible as it seems, there was no telephone line between Berlin and Potsdam, so Bethmann can't reply directly. He's pretty skeptical of the halt in Belgrade plan, but instead of making the drive to Potsdam for clarification, he passes it along to German agents in Austria with the instructions not to press the Austrians too hard to adopt it, and he doesn't even mention that it comes from the Kaiser himself. Meanwhile, in Russia, Sazonov gets reports of Austrians shelling Belgrade. These reports are false, of course. The Austrian army won't be ready to do anything until August 14th, but he has no way of knowing that. So he, one of the last men opposed to full Russian mobilization, lets the dam break and declares himself for a full mobilization of the Russian army. He and the Russian chief of staff, Yanushkevich, go to see the Tsar and convince him that the time has come. General mobilization is ordered. Night falls. It's 1 a.m., and the Tsar can't sleep. He sends a telegram to the Kaiser of Germany, and it reads thus: "Am glad you're back. In this serious moment, I appeal to you to help me. An ignoble war has been declared to a weak country. The indignation in Russia, shared fully by me, is enormous. I foresee that very soon I shall be overwhelmed by the pressure forced upon me, and be forced to take extreme measures which will lead to war. To try and avoid such a calamity as a European war, I beg you in the name of our old friendship to do what you can to stop your allies from going too far. Nicky." Now you have to remember that these two men were cousins. They were friends. All the avenues of diplomacy had failed. All the standard bureaucratic mechanisms of the state were driving them to war, so they reached out to one another, as cousins and as friends, to see if the two of them, dealing directly person to person, could avoid this war. And in a touch that could only come from these twilight days of empire, did they not refer to each other as Tsar or Kaiser. They don't even refer to each other as Wilhelm and Nicholas, but rather as Willie and Nicky. The Kaiser is awake too, and he responds. A flurry of telegrams get sent back and forth. At the end of these correspondences, Nicholas picks up the phone, calls Yanushkevich, and tells him to call off the general mobilization. Yanushkevich splutters and starts to reel off all the things that canceling mobilization means they're gonna have to do, but the Tsar says, "Cancel it," and hangs up the phone. On the morning of the 30th, Sazonov hears what the Tsar has done. He's shocked. He pulls in the head of the Duma, the Russian parliament, and the patriarch of the Orthodox Church, and they go in for a knockdown, drag-out meeting with the Tsar. The room is crowded, it's hot, talks are getting nowhere, and then Nicholas moves off alone, staring out the window at St. Petersburg, trying to think. After a few minutes of reflection, coming to no conclusion, a young man, an aide-de-camp, standing near the Tsar, says, "Majesty, we know how difficult it must be for you to decide." Without intention, these words cut. Nicholas had always been called a weak, indecisive, feckless leader, and he hated it. He wanted to shake off all those names people had been calling him for so many years. He wanted to show the world he wasn't some wishy-washy prince who couldn't make up his mind. And so, like that, with the words of some aide-de-camp whose name history has forgotten, Nicholas turns around and says, "I will sign the order." Back in Germany, Bethmann's finally come around. They're starting to make progress with the Austrians on the halt in Belgrade plan. The British have even said that this plan has their support. But Berthold won't accept it. Can't accept it unless the Russians agree to halt their mobilization. And here we hit the catch-22 of the First World War. This is the age of the train, the period where logistics and timetables dominated military thinking. All around Europe, it was thought that if you could just get your army to the battlefield while the other guy's forces were still arriving, you'd crush them every time. You'd win without contest. And as we've seen with the Austrians, mobilization can take weeks. It is a Herculean task to coordinate and move the millions of men that made up a modern army. And if Russia acquiesces and has her army stand down, they will be impossibly behind. If they...
Okay, so why are they making a big deal out of it taking Austria so long to mobilize, but it seems like the other armies don't have that same problem? Is that correct or no? I just, I don't know. Is there something special about the Austrian military that makes it difficult for them to mobilize?
They stop mobilization, and then Austria or Germany decide to attack, they'll have lost the war without even a fight. So Russia cannot stop mobilization. But if Russia mobilizes, that means Germany has to mobilize too or face the same dilemma. And now with Germany mobilized, what can France do but mobilize themselves? After all, the Franco-Prussian War taught them a hard, bitter lesson about what happens when you get your army to the field too slowly, and they will not be making that mistake again. And so the dominoes start to fall. But there's one last attempt. One last try to stop that crushing chain of causality leading the world inexorably to war. Portales, the poor German diplomat playing a bit part in a tragedy that he has the desire but not the means to avert, has one last meeting with Sazonov. He says to Sazonov, call off the general mobilization. And Sazonov says no. Portales pleads, for God's sakes, there will be no winner in this war. If we fight, it'll be revolution. It will be the end of monarchy. It'll be the end of us both. Won't you please call off this madness? And Sazonov says, no. Portales drops to his knees and says, if you do this, it will be slaughter. I beg of you, in the name of all that is right and decent, call off this mobilization. And Sazonov says no. Then Portales rises to his feet and takes a piece of paper from his pocket and says, in that case, sir, I have the honor to inform you that we're at war. He's still struggling to collect himself, saying, never thought I'd be leaving Russia like this. I don't know how I'll be able to pack. Sazonov kindly offers to send somebody to help gather his things. And a month later, 1 million men are dead. The Seminal catastrophe has begun.
A month later? Oh, wait.
Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead, short days ago. We lift the dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields, in Flanders fields. And now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow. In Flanders fields, in Flanders fields, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow. In Flanders fields, in Flanders fields.
Alright guys, I was not expecting that song at the very end, and I was looking at my phone looking up Flanders Fields because I don't know what Flanders is referring to. In Flanders Fields is a war poem in the form of a rondeau written during the First World War by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae is Canadian. What is Flanders? Flanders Fields is a common English name in the World War I battlefields of Belgium and France. Yeah, but where does Flanders come from? Don't understand. Flanders is a term referring to the Flemish region. It's the Dutch-speaking part of the Kingdom of Belgium. West Flanders and East Flanders There are several overlapping definitions, including ones related to culture, language, politics, and history. Flanders is Fleming. I don't know. It has to do with the Dutch-Belgium region? Is that right? I don't know, guys. I feel really lost on this one. You guys are going to have to let me know down in the comments what in the world the term Flanders is from. I'm not sure what Flanders Fields means exactly, other than it's just the name of like these areas of the World War I battlefields, I guess. But I don't know why it's called Flanders. So if you guys can shed some light on that for me, I would appreciate it. I've heard this song being referenced to in other videos, I believe, and some of your comments on my other videos regarding like Gallipoli and stuff. I believe you talked about the poppies and Flanders fields. So this is my first time hearing the song though, so that was pretty cool. It's a very pretty song for sure. It's not really an American thing, I feel like, because again, this is my very first time hearing the song. And we just don't, I'm sure there are some Americans who, you know, observe this as well, like Flanders Fields and poppies and all that stuff, but it's not a thing in the US like it is over in Europe or in Australia, apparently. A lot of new information for me on this. This whole like World War I journey I've taken so far, just with the Seminal tragedy videos alone, has just kind of is simultaneously like blown my mind with new information that's really cool, but also made me feel like, again, super ignorant and just kind of like, where have I been, you know, in the world? How do I not know this stuff? You know, how is this like such a big deal in, I guess, other parts of the world? Like, I guess, you know, I think part of it is World War I is not really as meaningful to Americans, I think, as it is to a lot of European nations and even Australia and stuff, because we entered the war really late, and I think we've always kind of viewed it as it's a European conflict, you know? I feel like we don't have the same sort of connection to it that Europe does, and countries more associated with Europe, I think. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all with that stuff. I don't mean to come across as like insensitive or anything to it, because I know World War I was a huge tragedy, and I'm not trying to belittle it at all. I guess I'm just trying to like make sense of why I don't know this stuff, I guess, and I'm trying to like rationalize it. I think the primary reason is just because we don't put the same weight on it over here in the US, and so we're much more ignorant of World War I than I think a lot of European countries are, a lot of Europeans. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is, you know, I probably just didn't pay attention to some stuff in history class, and or the curriculum just did not cover a lot of this stuff. I don't know, like, it's I can't really remember. But whatever the case, I feel like I am in for a huge journey, a huge ride. Not only learning about World War I, but also learning about, you know, just history of that time. Simple things like geography and stuff that I don't know much about. Like Napoleon was a huge eye-opening experience for me. I think this is going to be the exact same thing, because I feel like I know slightly more about World War I than I did about Napoleon, because I knew nothing about Napoleon. At the very least, I know kind of the dates for World War I, and I know that the US came in like 1908, like the very last year of the war or whatever, and I knew it started by an assassination. Other than that, I can't really tell you much about it, so other than what I've learned in these videos right here. So it's kind of sad when you think about it, actually. It's amazing just how, like, for such a huge tragic event, it's amazing how uneducated a lot of people are on it, including myself. I also think part of it is it gets overshadowed by World War II. I think that's another issue with it. Anyway, we're going to be diving into the prelude videos. What I have decided to do with this is I'm just going to do one video at a time, and I am not going to like rush myself to like get back on track with the dates. We will get back on track with the dates next week. I'm just going to do one video at a time. I'm not going to try to cram too much in. For me, it's more important to learn the necessary information I need to really set this up, and then you know, we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it. And like I said, it won't be too hard to get caught back up again. It's just gonna take us a little bit here to do it. So anyway, I hope you guys at least enjoyed the video. Maybe you learned a little tidbit. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Also, links to my social media in Discord and Patreon are in the description of the video and in my pinned comment down below. Roger here, and I thank you guys for watching. We'll be back with the prelude videos from the Great War channel. Hopefully they will be showing us more maps and giving us slightly new information than what this series did. At least according to you guys, that's what they do. So looking forward to that, looking forward to another angle on this, and until then, Roger and I will see you next time.